Hello, everyone. My name is Eva Keitel, and I'm excited to be hosting today's webinar. This webinar is entitled Improving Construction Productivity Starts with a Digital Supply Chain. You will hear about lessons learned for digitizing a construction project supply chain, available technology to help drive efficiencies, and how engaging suppliers early results in seamless construction planning. We are pleased to note that this webinar is sponsored by Fluor and Atlas RFID, dedicated CII members. This presentation will likely result in questions, so as they come to mind, please type them into the panel box on your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Our presenters are John Walker, Jeff Houts, and Thomas Hatley. Without further ado, I'd like to hand this over to John to begin.
Thanks, Eva. Yeah, I appreciate the introduction. Happy to be here with you all. I want to cover a quick safety topic before we get started related to fire safety and prevention. You know, we preach a lot of housekeeping at our job sites and keeping our work areas clean. I think the same can be said for a home environment as well. And so keeping clutter away from entries and exits and locations that you have to exit buildings from is definitely key in kind of starting off fire safety and prevention. Another thing is to look at when you start thinking about fire safety prevention is the equipment that you use to detect fire, and also put out fire. So smoke detectors, make sure their batteries are changed, they're up and running properly. Fire extinguishers, this goes for in your home, like your kitchen and your office, your job site. As we're approaching the summer months, it also is important to note that it is a law in the state of Alabama to have a fire extinguisher on your watercraft if you're out boating. So just things to keep in mind there. Also with fire safety is all about planning. You need to practice it, explain it, and think about it. So practice it. How would you escape in a fire? Explain it to your family, to your coworkers, to your small children, and then think about it. Don't just forget about it. And then also just some stats here that I found kind of staggering. There's over 1 million fires a year in the U.S., which results in 15,000 injuries and unfortunately 3,400 deaths. So some of these things we have listed up here could hopefully drive those numbers downward. Some additional stats: less than 50% of people know how to confidently use a fire extinguisher. Also, 50% people really know how to get out in the event of a fire emergency, where your exits or entries are at. And then finally, less than 25% of people know the location of fire extinguishers in their building to even go get one to put it out in the event of a fire. So, it's important to take a look at your fire safety plan and also the equipment you use to prevent fires. So hopefully that's resonates with some of our folks here. I'd like to go through introductions. I'll kick it off with myself. My name is John Walker. I'm Vice President of Strategic Services for Atlas RFID Solutions. Been working with Atlas for several years now. Been in construction and supply chain for about 10 now, in various roles with EPC companies as well as contractors for the materials management supply chain side of things. So I'm happy to be here to present today. I thank you all for allowing us to speak, and hopefully it's an informative presentation. I'll kick it over to Thomas Hatley for introduction from his side as well.
Thanks, John. Thomas Hatley, as John mentioned, Global Program Manager and RFID Subject Matter Expert at Fluor. I've been with Fluor for 7 years now and implemented Digitize and supply chain solution on various projects across the world.
And lastly, thanks, Thomas. Lastly, hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Houts, and I've just begun my 30th year with Fluor, most of which has been in project material management roles around the world. I have a passion for planning and execution of the business end of capital projects. My current role, though, is a functional one, serving as our global lead of material planning and field material management. As well, I also sponsor our RFID efforts, and I also oversee Fluor supply chain's roles supporting advanced work packaging. So I will now lead us through the agenda as it comes up on the screen. So the first bullet, I will first be covering a lay of the land, or a view of a lay of the land around what supply chain can do when proper material planning enables a digital supply chain to feed large-scale construction productivity improvements. I want to set the stage for how strategies to move more planning activities upstream or earlier within supply chain and material management can have a huge impact on performance. So for the second bullet, so following that, John Walker will describe supplier engagement for their Jovix RFID program and how, and very importantly, when suppliers can be engaged to provide maximum value downstream. We've learned good lessons together on how this upstream supplier interaction results in major return on the time and money investment of having a complete RFID program. So the third bullet, Thomas Hatley will then show details of our real-world live project example and how it benefited from this program, truly taking field material management to the future, which goes along with the CII annual conference's theme this summer, which is "The Future is Here." Thomas will show that even on an oil and gas mega project, the results that we expected were the results that we achieved. So John will then pick back up with a preview on a technology demo that we three presenters will be performing in San Diego during our annual conference in early August, as well as other CII initiatives like some current research team work that we're involved with. And lastly, we will end time for questions and answers. We'll try to keep going to enable for there to be good time for Q&A at the end. So continuing on. Through these examples or themes, I want to set the stage for a mindset of accepting more responsibility for supply chain's role in planning for project success and being a true partner in construction-driven execution. Planning is hard work. Okay, so I'll say it again. Planning is hard work, but it's work we welcome so that we add value for the whole supply chain and not just purchasing. So we can't just buy and forget. We have to know where each and every item we're buying will get installed. And the data to feed work phase planning and the advanced work packaging process must be accurate and sound. The data must be accurate and sound. We must ensure through material planning that everything is tied to its eventual construction work package and also to its required at site date. And not just any made up date or temporary date or a placeholder, but a real required at site date. Material data, accurate, clean, and healthy data feeds a digital supply chain. And if we add this value, we inform projects not just of when something will show up at site, but that the work package can be built. Constraint-free work package reporting is what drives our goals. And healthy data to do that is the key. So on the next slide, the types of data are examples. So some of these are accurate required at site data for sure, but also accurate delivery data. And that's data not just broken down into the first or the last item on a PO to show up, but the groups of shipments and what's in them. That also is hard work, especially on bulk. So much of this work is about bulk material. But we add little value if we don't ensure that even for the largest orders, we feed the job site with the detail they need. Also knowing which work package the items belong to and keeping up with any changes that happens. That's inevitable. Change happens, but keeping up with it and not losing control of that data is really, really important. So only when kept healthy, these data feed knowing whether material will be a constraint for the buildability of a work package. And lastly, keeping quantities, sizes, tag numbers, descriptions, etc. accurate are key to let me say, keeping the machine running. Lastly, as a good transition to John, knowing where an item is, especially at the job site, can be made so much more accurate and feed us tremendous, a super high level of field productivity improvements. When a top-notch RFID program, which is fed by healthy material data, is employed. So John, over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that overview to see Fluor's perspective and how you all are viewing digital supply chain and incorporating that into your project execution. So I appreciate that overview. But we've used the term a few times here, digital supply chain. So I want to level set and just really take a look at what does that mean and what are some key concepts of a digital supply chain. So when I think of digital supply chain, I look at the definition of transforming traditional exchanges of information from vendors and suppliers to project teams from a document-centric approach to taking more of a data-centric approach as it relates to the entire construction project. If we take a look at this, what it means in practicality, traditional exchanges of information from suppliers and vendors is very document-based. So what I mean by that is you get advanced shipping notices or notifications of materials that are ready to be shipped to a project. It's typically in an email format with an attachment that's PDF or it's Excel-based or maybe Word-based that has an outline of the items that are shipping, but there's also a very important pieces of information included in these documents that includes crate level detail, what items are in which crate, as well as subcomponent items that may not be already identified in the materials management or the planning tools that you have on site. So really this information is provided by suppliers in this document-centric world, but unfortunately a lot of that information does not make it back into the proper systems prior to it arriving onto the job site. If you take another approach and look at how we utilize the documentation from suppliers, a truck shows up to the job site, brings this packing list that you see here on the left of the screen that has the items that have shipped, the quantities, they offload the goods, and then the checkers in the warehouse or laydown yard begin marking on that documentation and identifying items that have arrived, noting down any discrepancies, and maybe even adding in some ship loose components that need to be tied back, as Jeff was saying, to the work plan or to a parent tag or something along that. That information is then taken in a document approach and brought into an office here. And this is from, I believe, actually one of Fluor's offices here. So you can see a pile of paper that's pretty hard to weed through. And then unfortunately, that paper stack usually is sitting next to a poor data entry clerk that has to go weed through all this information. And this information, the nuggets of information that's included on this packing list and paper documentation oftentimes doesn't make it back into the proper system. There is a role, there is a level of importance that is placed on this paperwork pile here. It usually starts with MRR, so your material receiving report, in that key system so that you can pay bills. The next is issuing out to construction. Really, the third piece is making sure that all the information that's included in that documentation is keyed back into a system somewhere that people can see it through other parts of the project, which is really one of the most important things that we can do in the supply chain. Unfortunately, what that does is push a lot of the data entry work downstream to our project teams rather than upstream in the supply chain. It also creates an environment of come and get it or call me if you need it. There's various parties in our project ecosystem that benefit greatly from the information that's sometimes buried in this documentation, such as workplace planners, schedulers, as well as engineering information is usually buried deep into this documentation. It's often hard to get, but requires people to come and search for it. The digital supply chain program really tries to look at that from an inverse route. So with suppliers actually creating data attributes about those materials that are inbound to the job site at point of origin, rather than waiting to key that into the system, downstream once it hits the job site. So a key to the digital supply chain is really being able to capture the information from a data standpoint and then publish that information to the relevant parties and systems that are part of that project execution. So it's really the inverse of the document-centric approach that we're typically in today. Is really focusing on a data-centric approach and then sharing that data accordingly throughout the project geoscape. I want to take a look at really 3 bullets here of why would we undertake creating this digital supply chain. I got 3 bullets here, and the first one really focuses on similar to what I was just talking about, is digital transformation of all components into data attributes that could be tied back to a work plan. That's a key piece right there. So if we think about our work plan and we think about the term ship loose components, which coming from a materials management side of things, that's oftentimes a dreaded word, like managing your ship loose. That's a hard task to do. And what I mean by ship loose is if we go out and we buy a pump, let's say 201P001. oftentimes one line item in our ERP system or in our planning tools. But when the vendor actually packages that and ships that to us, it could span across a couple of trucks, it could be multiple crates of information, and not having that properly identified in the system really inhibits our ability to manage those materials properly. And also it really ties into what Jeff alluded to. Our goal is to release constraint-free AWPs from a materials perspective to construction. The goal of AWP and work phase planning is to reduce the barriers, keep frontline supervision focused on crew productivity. But once we don't have all of the materials associated properly to a work plan, when we issue those materials out, we oftentimes leave things behind, which pulls frontline supervision out to come and chase material, which is oftentimes not a very good thing. So, I'd like to pause there and just ask Jeff, in your current role as Fluor Material Planning Director, what are your thoughts on properly allocating and identifying materials prior to arrival on site? And, really, how is that helping Fluor? And what are some of the things you all are seeing as a result of having a digital supply chain?
Thanks, John, for the question. It is a good chance to sort of talk about this example of bad or missing data having a knock-on effect on everything downstream from it, right? Like you mentioned about ship loose material, or what we call sub items or components of equipment that are not identified and tracked. A sea container shows up at site with one lot of goods in it. A lot of people on the phone, I think, have probably been through that, or on the WebEx. That can take days or weeks to shake out and probably never get fully 100% accurate. But a major effect of this is not only the time it takes in identifying, I think, the material and tying it to where it belongs at the site, but its effect on increased surplus material. A site can have material it doesn't know it has or where it is, and then what happens? We spend lots of time sending people out to find something in a warehouse or in a laydown yard, and eventually they give up, right? I mean, we get too busy to spend too much time doing that, and what happens? We buy it again, and then sometimes again, and that's totally unnecessary and very costly. So that translates that, John, into money. So those are some thoughts.
Yeah, that's great, Jeff. I appreciate the feedback on that question there. I think that totally makes sense. Kind of looking down the list here at the second bullet, a digital supply chain really focuses on integrating suppliers in the overall project plan. And Jeff and I both sit on Research Team 363, which really just kicked off. And this is a major focus of our research team: is how do we get suppliers integrated to the overall plan? Historically, communication to suppliers has been just send it, because of a lack of trust in the industry to provide it when it's needed. So, we stockpile materials and we sit on lots of materials that may not be installed for a year out, just because we don't have the trust and really the know-abouts of how our construction schedule is changing in order to accommodate for kind of that just-in-time mentality. But integrating suppliers in the overall project plan and really opening the bi-directional communication really creates a healthy environment between suppliers and project teams that I think both parties can really benefit in the end. The third bullet down there is listed as auto ID, and we refer to auto ID as barcodes, RFID tags, passive and active, BLE, anything that's used to automate interaction with an asset. And one of the key things that's been touted in the industry over the years is RFID utilization in construction. I think we all are aware of the benefits related to that. It obviously improves your transactional efficiencies with being able to receive items by scanning it, as well as quickly moving assets by utilizing RFID and GPS. But with the digital supply chain program, the basis of this is utilizing auto ID to identify assets upstream and identify more assets with more RFID and barcodes and other auto ID applications. This allows for greater transactional efficiencies downstream, and it is really a fantastic byproduct of creating a digital supply chain. So, those are three things that came to our mind, and what we're seeing in the industry is really great advantages to creating a digital supply chain. And so I hope that kind of resonates with the folks on the phone here. So, I want to take a look at, in order to get some of these benefits and also to get some of the benefits that Thomas will talk about towards the end of the presentation, I want to look at keys to digital supply chain success. I think number one is define a strategy. And when I say define a strategy, it is a programmatic approach to deploying a digital supply chain. It's not just language in the contract. It's not just fine print that somebody will put an RFID tag on an asset. It's understanding the responsibilities of all parties. It's including detailed contractual language, and it's also selecting software systems that can help automate some of the processes throughout the digital supply chain. In addition, it's setting accurate and measurable expectations with all suppliers and fabricators in your ecosystem, as well as ensuring those expectations are clearly defined. You know, I got an example there, like supplier will send and provide packing lists. Well, that's very ambiguous and very nebulous. It doesn't specify what data needs to be included. You know, what is the delivery methodology? What is the timeliness? So we need to think about these things as we're putting this program in place, because ultimately you need to have a way to monitor compliance. If you haven't set clear expectations that are easily defined and manageable, you won't be able to properly monitor to ensure that suppliers in your ecosystem are actually participating. You know, and that ties in tightly with bullet number 5 down here. And that's the focus on a digital supply chain coordinator. You know, I don't have it last because it's least important. This person should be defined up in the very beginning bullet. But bottom line is, a digital supply chain coordinator is a trend in the industry that we're seeing that helps monitor the compliance and participation. It helps answer questions and kind of herd the cats of information, and works very tightly with the workplace planning group on a project site to provide supply chain information from a construction perspective. So those are 5 top things that we're seeing as keys to having a successful supply chain rollout. So, you know, we talk a little bit about the digital supply chain, what it is. I want to talk about some of the components of the program. First, focusing on the process, then speaking about the technology that we're seeing and being deployed in the industry, as well as the people, and focusing on that digital supply chain coordinator role and what that actually is. So, you know, from a process side of things, there's really 6 steps. Number 1 is develop it as a program. Number 2, it's set clear expectations early with suppliers. Don't set the expectations or ask after, you know, award of contract, award of PO. Include that information as clearly explained in the RFP and RFQ. The number 3 is then train and onboard, bring the suppliers up to speed on the program. And I can speak from Atlas's perspective on this, but this is one that we had a challenge in overcoming. So, you know, when we first got our start, we went upstream and focused a lot on RFID tagging of pipe spools and structural steel at fabricators, which was very easy to go face-to-face and train boots on the ground, because there's only 3 or 4 or 5 of these that support a project at any given time. So it's easy to travel those locations. With the introduction of a digital supply chain, there could be hundreds of suppliers in a project supply chain that have to be onboarded, you know, for the project's digital supply chain to work properly. So the solution needs to be scalable, and you have to be far-reaching. Make sure that you can onboard all the suppliers in a timely manner. Next piece is provide those suppliers with durable and affordable hardware. So kind of going on a theme is, you don't need to travel to each location. You don't need to provide a $5,000 tablet to each of these locations as well. We need to leverage hardware that exists, such as consumer devices, as well as leverage cheaper alternatives to RFID. So, you know, getting smart with our tagging strategy, applying barcodes, applying passive RFID. These are all strategies that will lower the cost of investment from the hardware side of things, but also provide maximum value in the digital supply chain. Next is cloud-based software and consumer devices. You need to have some ability to roll out an application to all of these suppliers for them to leverage the infrastructure someplace on their consumer devices to be used in their facilities. And finally, last but not least again, is empower a digital supply chain coordinator. You know, it's one thing to appoint somebody as a role. The next thing is to allow them to be empowered, to really focus on the health, to make sure that monitoring compliance is key, and that all suppliers are participating in this program of providing the information that's contractually required, but also communicating back and forth with the supplier to make that kind of healthy relationship and balance in a supplier-project relationship. You know, a few years ago, Fluor really came to us with this idea, this process, this wanting to start this digital supply chain, and kind of started with a process flow here. And I'll pause a minute. I know Thomas Hatley, who's co-presenting today, was intimately familiar with this process flow and helped develop it and put it together. So I'd like for him maybe just talk a little bit about, you know, some of the key elements of this, if you will. Thomas, I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So starts with the initial onboarding process. As John mentioned, we want to set expectations as early as possible with suppliers. Preferably that's in the RFQ stage of the procurement and contract cycle. Then we want to roll over those requirements and create contractual requirements for the suppliers. Then we move to training, where, as we alluded to earlier, we use a web-based training tool for scalability so that we don't have to meet one-on-one with suppliers on major jobs where there's 100+ suppliers, or travel to their location. We can do that simply by leveraging a web-based training tool. And then there's tag logistics. We have to get the unique ID, RFID tags, and barcodes to the suppliers for application. And then lastly, the data operations. So this is when the suppliers execute the method for associating the RFID tags to the materials themselves. So this is the workflow that we put together based on that, and it is slightly flexible, and we've worked with Atlas and partnered with Atlas to evolve this process, becoming much more scalable and streamlined over the last year. And John, I believe you have some demonstration of what that looks like in today's forum.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. I appreciate that overview from your perspective. And in working with Fluor and other strategic clients, it was important to us to put together a program that could support this digital supply chain. So I'm going to play this video here. We've had mixed opinions on the actual connectivity and the lag, so I apologize in advance if the video doesn't play properly. We're going to include this in the final presentation deck, so you'll be able to download it and play it later. But I'm going to go ahead and fire this up, and then we'll speak to this after. So I see a couple feedbacks in the comments there. It looks like the audio was a little struggling with that. So I had no idea that was not playing until just aware of that. So I apologize if I had you guys sit through a couple minutes of no audio on that video. That video will be available for download with the final presentation, but apologize for the lack of sound or difficulties with the sound at present. So, I guess the purpose of that video is to show the scalable solution that's been rolled out in order to bring suppliers, other entities into the digital supply chain program. And we take a look at, what does that look like from a timeline perspective, suppliers on board. First off, it's really focused on three aspects. Number one is contracting. Number two is onboarding, and then number three is report monitoring and performance monitoring. So really the contracting side of things focuses on, providing language that suppliers can bid against and completely understand in order to participate in this program. The supplier onboarding part really includes the training aspect and also delivery of the RFID tag to the individual suppliers. And finally, the operating and monitoring side, operational aspects and routine monitoring side of things is focused on some automated reporting, as well as digital supply chain coordinators being able to monitor the performance of the overall program. We talked a little bit about the process. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about, the software and the technology side of things. We are talking about a digital supply chain here, so there should be some level of automation and software to enable the program included. So, at a minimum, extending software capabilities to suppliers to create a digital packing list is definitely key component of the software. In addition, key software capabilities should include at a minimum auto IDing capabilities of materials. So this includes RFID tagging, this includes barcoding, the ability to take assets and apply auto ID and then make that correlation in a system is key. Next step is really focusing on containerizing is kind of how we call it, I guess, and that's being able to take assets and put them into a box and understand what assets are included in that box, and then maybe putting a level of RFID or barcode on the outside of that box to track your bulk commodities. The next piece is really the software needs to have the capability to status materials through the supply chain. And statusing shouldn't just take place when it's in your care, custody, and control. It should have the ability to status shipments, as well as other aspects of the supply and the shipment throughout the supply chain prior to it getting to your job site. And then finally, the ability to share data that's created in this system to multiple other systems in the project ecosystem. From Fluor's perspective, we have an integration with Mapman, which is our materials management system. It's a bidirectional integration that allows for information created by suppliers to be passed to and from, back and forth into Jovix and back into Mapman. So it's important to be able to share the data that's created. And finally, taking a look at it from the segregation of supplier data and information. We're dealing with a lot of different entities, plugging into this single system. So we have to make sure that the data is segregated and no proprietary information is shared. And so each individual supplier is provided with a login with roles and credentials and permissions applied to the ability for them to see information and also share data. So we talked a little bit about the software side of things. The other component of the technology piece is really the hardware. I put this statement up here: physical tagging forces suppliers to properly identify, in most cases. There are exceptions, right? Obviously, this is the new concept, so it's definitely takes a little doing. But with the physical tagging, where suppliers have to actually apply RFID or barcodes on the assets, there's a higher level of supplier quality control from these facilities in order to make sure that the goods being sent are captured properly due to the scrutiny that's on these packing lists as they come out of the vendor shops, making sure that the data is in compliance. As it relates to physical tagging, some of the types of auto ID that we leverage are barcodes, active tags, passive RFID tags, as well as some other types of tagging strategies. So this is a barcode, this is an active RFID, and this is a passive. So, as of lately, we've seen a big boom with the passive RFID tags, just due to the low cost of entry for passive RFID, as well as some of the advantages for being able to tag more assets due to the low cost of entry. And then now, from the mobile device side of things, rolling out the software on mobile devices that are already part of the infrastructure supply chain is key, as well as leveraging some of the integrated capabilities in these devices, such as an integrated camera that acts as a barcode scanner rather than having a Bluetooth scanner in addition to the phone. So being able to think about how do we leverage the hardware that is existing is definitely key. And then finally, being able to leverage gate readers at various points along the supply chain that help possible automating shipment progression throughout the supply chain. These are some of the hardware components that we're seeing a trend in the industry really going towards. And I'll end it with the people side of the components of the system, and really the trend we're seeing in the industry from, we're staffing up internally as well as seeing a lot of our clients staff these positions is really the digital supply chain coordinator. That role is really kind of bridges the gap between procurement and construction. Much like a work-based planner kind of bridges the gap between engineering, scheduling, and construction side of things in the field, this digital supply chain coordinator really focuses on bridging that gap to construction and really monitoring the overall health of the program as it relates to the digital supply chain. One note to take away on this slide right here, from what we've seen so far, it's not really a best practice to offload some of this extra responsibility onto buyers and expediters. It is creating a new position on the org chart, so it is beneficial to kind of staff that accordingly. So, that kind of wraps up my section with the components of the system. Hopefully that was informative. I apologize once again for the video, but please download that and feel free to watch it at your leisure after, and you'll have better audio. But with that, I'll turn it over to Thomas Hatley to review the project case study.
Thanks, John. So we have an ongoing oil refinery project in the Middle East with over 175 suppliers onboarded and actively applying passive RFID tags. So far, we've tagged over 400,000 materials with these vendor-supplied passive RFID tags that have arrived on site. We've used the Jovix material readiness solution to manage the materials at site, and this includes a quick receipt of material, leveraging the barcode that's on the RFID tag to easily and seamlessly receive material. Because this project was kicked off in early 2017, the material vendors responsible for submitting spreadsheets to create the data linkage between the RFID tags and materials. So the mobile application supplier side that John previewed to us both in the video and as part of his presentation was not available back in early 2017 when this project started. In fact, we'll talk a little bit more about lessons learned, but that was using these spreadsheets was something that we have evolved to move away from. And that was a major lesson learned out of this project that we partner with Atlas to create and support the creation of that mobile application out of. So let's move on to some of the benefits that we witnessed from measuring quantifiable data from this project. In order to quantify these benefits, we took time studies to measure field material management activities both prior to and post the digital supply chain and Atlas Jovix implementation. What you're seeing here in this graph and with some statistics out to the left is just a snapshot of our findings. This is just looking at the receiving portion of the field material management work process. We've seen similar efficiency gains in other material management activities as well. Additionally, no material control risks have been mitigated by the increased visibility. So a couple of examples here. We had some pipe spools that were received from Supplier in frames with mixed pipe spools and inaccurate packing lists. Again, just as a qualification, this is in an environment in which we're using an Excel-based digital packing list, not the Jovix mobile application here. Jovix allowed, and our digital supply chain allowed for inventory reconciliation of these pipe spools. And then with structural steel, we had receipt into unknown material locations when they were received prior to the digital supply chain implementation. So we were able to leverage our landscape of hardware and software and digital supply chain to retroactively apply supplier barcode data and GPS geolocation pins to those structural steel pieces. With the steel mitigation, risk mitigation and pipe spool risk mitigation combined, we're estimating a savings of $1.6 to $3.2 million just on those two use cases alone to the project. Furthermore, projects using a digital supply chain can expect to replace multiple data entry coordinators with a single digital supply chain coordinator, as John alluded to earlier in the presentation. This opens up bandwidth for necessary and proactive field material management activities. Things like OS&D management, filing, document management, cycle counts, and even proactive and preemptive project closeout activities. Things that get pushed to the back burner, so to speak, when we're in throes of project execution. Also, we have less discrepancies in system material locations and actual material locations, providing better and more accurate material visibility. And not listed on this as a bullet here, but shown in the pictures on the bottom right, is better reporting capabilities through a digital supply chain. So this is actually a one-for-one comparison of prior to a digital supply chain and Atlas Jovix implementation and post on the right. So prior to this information in terms of pick lists and fulfilling pick lists was a daily exercise, writing this on the whiteboard, as you can see there on the left-hand side. Now that we have an incorporated implementation of a digital supply chain, that reporting is done live in the system. It's sortable, it's filterable, and we save the time savings of having to write this out every day on the whiteboard as well. So there's just a snapshot of some of the benefits. Fluor's worked to put together a full-on value study on this particular project, and those are just some things that I pulled out for purposes of this presentation. We saw significant savings in risk mitigation, as can be shown, applied to this project by leveraging a digital supply chain. But we also had some lessons learned. First and foremost is the importance of data quality and timeliness. We need to ensure, as we've mentioned several times in this presentation, that we have a really well-defined scope for suppliers for providing the correct data to support our digital supply chain. And then on top of that, we have to implement some sort of accountability. This plays into early cross-functional engagement. Of course, naturally, when we're using a digital supply chain, using mobile tools at our job sites, we have to work with project IT to ensure that we have proper Wi-Fi capabilities, proper quality of service, and bandwidth to support that. We have to link up with our procurement and contracts group, again, to establish supplier expectations during the RFQ stage and to roll those over into contractual requirements. And we work with expediting and supplier quality services as well to ensure the data quality and timeliness of the data needed to support the digital supply chain. And lastly, as is with the case of Fluor and Atlas, as John mentioned, we have a full-scale bi-directional integration with our material management system in the Jovix solution. Integration ownership and oversight of the data that moves between those two systems is very important, because now that we've digitized our supply chain, we rely heavily on that data for project execution. John is going to show us how CII is taking the digital supply chain to the next level.
From y'all's project, it was compelling results there, and yeah, I appreciate y'all sharing that. So I do want to spend a few minutes. You know, the digital supply chain and really supply chain initiatives internal to CII are really taking off. There's several initiatives that are going on, as well as the annual conference in 2019 that leads to a demo that we'll be participating in, that you guys can do some hands-on stuff. I want to talk about those things that are going on right now. So a few of the supply chain initiatives, just for awareness within CII, is Research Team 344, which is the improved integration of the supply chain. This is a publication that's available through the CII portal that really took a look at, you know, the kind of visibility that was available for different supply chain nodes of a construction supply chain. They reported out, if you all remember, did a really great skit at the 2018 annual conference, but there's even more compelling documentation in the CII library for this. So go check that out. I think they're actually spinning up a second team to improve that reporting out as well. So it'd be good to see the progression of that. The second thing is one that, Jeff Houts and myself currently sit on, and that's Research Team 363, which, as I alluded to earlier, is really integration of suppliers into AW programs for projects. We formed in January 2019, and we got about a year and a half worth of work ahead of us. A lot of good stuff coming out of this, we feel like, and we should be reporting out in summer of 2020, really focusing on how to integrate suppliers into your project execution and project planning. So. Goes very nicely with some of the things we've been talking about here today. And finally, Thomas is participating in a FIATech technology subcommittee research project that is really focused on the data side of things from supply chain. So what data needs to be surfaced out of a supply chain to fuel these different programs and project initiatives that are ongoing in order to kind of create that one source of truth, if you will, of a single system throughout the project. This is currently being formed right now, and I'm not sure how much more information is available on that, but that's just another thing that's related to supply chain and CII that's kicking off. So a lot of good movement in this space, and we look forward to helping support these initiatives going forward, and I encourage you all to check them out also. With that being said, the 2019 annual conference is fast approaching. We've been participating the past several years, and it's fantastic information. A lot of great people that are speaking at these events, and you learn a tremendous amount. So it's August 5th and 7th in San Diego at the Grand Hyatt. So Eva, who's our coordinator of this webinar today, is the main contact. So she'll get you all taken care of. But this is a really great event that encouraging member companies to participate in. So it's a very valuable event. With that being said, we do have a little skit here, a little video or a little animation of the demo that we'll be giving at the annual conference. So you'll be able to come out and get hands-on. We're going to break people up into teams essentially, and have a leaderboard that is a race against a status quo. So we'll have a two-person team. One person is the supplier, the other person is the actual job site. So we'll be able to get hands-on, creating a packing list on the phone, and then being able to receive those items into inventory, all in a friendly race against the other competitors in this environment, and hopefully for the chance to win prizes as well if you can get to the top. So a really cool event that we're looking forward to hosting there. In addition to this hands-on demo and being able to try out the software, myself, Thomas Hadley, and then also Jeff Houts will be in attendance at this, and happy to talk through more details about this presentation and other things that we're doing in the space of the digital supply chain. So with that being said, we wanted to leave a little bit of time for potential questions and answers, and so I will pause there and open it up for few more slides there for any questions that may be on the line, and I guess I'll pass it back over to Eva for that. So thanks again.
Thank you, guys. That was a great presentation, and we will post this recording that includes the slides to the CII website, and then send out a notification to all of the attendees, so you will be able to see this again, share it with your colleagues. And one of the questions that we have received is, the platform that you described, John, and that Thomas and Jeff work with, is this a platform that is developed by Jovix exclusively for Fluor, or is this a standard Jovix offering?
Yeah, I'll take that one. This is Thomas. So
Great.
Generally, what we've spoken about is applicable, is available to all builders and owners alike. There is a specific piece that is specific to Fluor, and that is the integration with our material management software that sends all the feed data into the Atlas Jovix material readiness solution to allow it to integrate back and tell us when our material has been received at site, so that we can pay invoices, and then tell us when material has been issued over to construction or subcontractors, so that we can run planning scenarios and have that data. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. Another question. that maybe you can also help answer, Thomas, is how big are the RFID tags for those items that you all are using? I mean, are they small? Are they large? How does it conflict with any of the product that you keep track of?
Yeah, they're relatively small. I mean, they're I would say approximately the size of most paper currency. So we don't find that they conflict with any of the items. And in fact, on some larger pieces of material, you could even do 2 tags on a piece of material if necessary on like a giant pipe spool or something like that. But yeah, generally size isn't an issue at all.
Excellent. So this question is a little bit more along the lines of the structure of the project as to how the number of suppliers that Fluor is utilizing. So when you first initiated this and began this, did you have a lot of suppliers that started in with the process? Was it first, just a handful, or was it all 175 suppliers that were referenced? How did that, what was the scale of initiation and then the growth associated with that?
I'll take this one too. So really, we kind of we dove right in. This is one of our first major jobs to utilize the supplier engagement program, and we started with the idea that every supplier on the project would be engaged in associating and applying RFID tags, and furthermore, our response rate and cooperativeness from the supplier environment was really positive. Most of them cooperated, right off the bat. We do have some suppliers that did not want to perform the activities, and we're able to work around that. But generally, the cooperation's been great.
Excellent. What have been the challenges of integrating this initiative with the suppliers? I know you said you just jumped in and you were able to get some good buy-in, but has there been any specific challenges that kind of come to mind?
Biggest challenge is the data, and that's why I listed that as the first and foremost lessons learned. Because with this particular project case in mind, we're using an Excel spreadsheet to receive the data from the suppliers and upload it into the Jovix system. It allows for a lot of flexibility, so suppliers can cross tag, which is when they indicate that tag A is associated to pipe spool 1, when in fact, in reality, physically tag B is associated to pipe spool 1, and so on and so forth. So the Jovix mobile application that we worked and partnered with Atlas to develop systematically restricts the supplier to doing things that are more consistent and clean. So that has been the biggest challenge, because from suppliers, there is an effort to go back and clean that up, and I think we made significant steps in the past year to mitigate most, if not all, of that data quality issue.
I could add to that.
Oh, go ahead.
Eva, I was just going to add a quick comment that, suppliers, we've been asking to barcode or do various things like that for years in other ways. I think that's a reason why there was less pushback than maybe we thought there might even be by the suppliers, because they also want to work effectively. This gives them a reason to work effectively for something that's really going to have an impact. And so it wasn't really about that. It wasn't really to the projects that we've done this on about, the cost of the tags themselves. These are minor in comparison to getting the data right. To Thomas's point, and we've harped on this, but minor in comparison to data health to feed this system to work really good.
So on that same aspect of challenges, what about the maybe the multi-languages from locations all over the globe, or different levels of sophistication with the technology that people may or may not have? Has that been a challenge of any type?
Hey, this is John Walker. Can you all hear me? I had an audio issue a second ago. I could take that if you all have audio.
Yes.
Great. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the points that making during the training and onboarding side of things. It's got to be scalable and far-reaching. And whenever you have a far-reaching solution in all the corners of the globe, you have to make sure that the software is capable of being used in different languages. And so that has been a challenge that we have seen. And one of the things that we're doing is we're currently rolling out a platform that will allow for different language conversions, as well as, how we mitigate it today is all the work instructions and work processes that are related to this digital supply chain program can be translated into the native language of the supplier. So, we worked with several different ways of mitigating the language barrier. That is a thing, and that's something that we're definitely working through right now, but it has been a lessons learned and something we're proactively trying to get in front of. The software itself is pretty intuitive, and if you have the work instructions translated into native language, it allows for a little bit easier way for training languages outside of English, right? It has been a lessons learned and something we're proactively working at right now for sure.
Okay, so that's definitely one of those. Once you're in, you jumped in, you had some good buy-in, but that might be one of those areas that could pose a little difficulty, maybe on phases to bring people in, converting to a different language that you might not already have available, that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
So on that same note, what have you seen? Any additional costs from the suppliers, the vendors, as they have integrated into this new system?
Just in general, I'll take it. The answer is no, we haven't.
Okay.
Not from the suppliers. As Thomas showed, some really summary level view is the return proven to be greater than the investment that our projects are having to undertake. And so now that we've reproven that, part of that math was not any increased PO line item from a supplier needing to account for the extra cost and effort of doing this. Again, to my point is people have been asking them to barcode and do different things like that for a long time. So thankfully that was really a non-event.
So is the supplier required to have a software license in order to utilize this, or is this all supported from Fluor?
Take it, Thomas.
Yeah, up until this point, we have not required the suppliers to purchase their own licenses to enter information to support the digital supply chain, and I don't anticipate us doing that moving forward.
So if others were to integrate it, it would be on their decision-making process and how they choose to, get buy-in and get people involved in their particular process.
Yes.
So here's a couple of questions as it relates to the specific components of the RFID tag. So I'll have John focus on these. It's a two-part question. One, are RFID tags resistant to extreme weather conditions, i.e. -35 Celsius? And then are these active or passive RFID tags?
Both great questions. So I'll take that one. So focusing on, what type of tag is it? We deploy both active and passive RFID tags. So active, if you're familiar, has a battery on the inside, a longer read range. It's a more costly option. Passive is a lower read range, lower cost, but it's one that we've seen kind of a boom in the industry as of late. With our active tags, we've done full hardware certifications, pretty substantial heat and cold testing, as well as military grade certifications on those tags. With the passive RFID, it's really beneficial because, with the passive RFID tag, it's a standard protocol, communication protocol between readers and tags. So you have the ability to leverage all different types of RFID tags depending on the situation you're in. Now, internally, we have certified several RFID tags that we use for different applications that are all UV resistant, oil resistant, and can withstand harsh conditions. We've got them in Western Australia all the way up to into Fort McMurray as well. I think we have some up towards the Yellowknife area that, those are some pretty substantial temperature ranges in those two locations. And we've done plenty of lab testing on these tags as well. So that was one of the things that we really had to look at, is that the environment that we use these tags in is harsh, and we could not roll out a solution that the tags broke or did not work well in these environments. So something we put a lot of emphasis on.
Excellent. So we do have a few more questions, and what we will do is we will have Jeff, Thomas, and John review those questions and respond to everyone individually. At this time, we have reached our conclusion of the hour, and so I'd like to thank everybody who spent the time today. We really appreciate both the attendees on the phone as well as our presenters. I believe that this presentation has been extremely insightful, and I want you all to remember that this information, these people will be on site at our annual conference. So if you have not already registered for this event, please make the time to do that. If we need to give you more information to get justification within your organization, we're here to support you. And like I said, this presentation will be made available on the CII website for review later this week, as well as we will send you, if you've registered, we will send you the webinar link for your review. Thank you again for joining us, and you all have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Eva.